Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Henney with Project Q Atlanta. Welcome to another episode of Q Conversations, our Friday live chat about LGBTQ issues. Today, we're exploring efforts to create safe spaces for transgendered people in Atlanta, including 3 campaigns that have raised millions of dollars. Joining me are Taylor Alxndr, a performer and co-founder of Southern Fried Queer Pride; Justine Ingram, an activist who works with the Southern AIDS Coalition and the Trans Housing Atlanta program; and activist and photographer Jesse Pratt López. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Having us.
Also joining us is Project Q's Mike Fleming, who is moderating the online chat to the right of your screen. Drop your comments in there during the event. And if you have any questions for our panelists during the show, there's a little button down at the bottom that says Ask a Question, and you can drop your question in there, and we'll get to those at the end of the event. All right. Well, so with that, let's just get started. So I wanted to ask you first if each of you will sort of address what you see in terms of housing and community spaces for trans people. What do you see as sort of the need, and why is it so important to have safe spaces specifically for trans people? So I guess, Taylor, you want to take that one first?
Sure. So obviously housing for the LGBTQ community overall is a major thing that we still haven't fully, worked out and acquired as a community, but especially for trans folks who face a number of different oppressions and marginalizations. Housing that affirms us, housing that reflects and is accepting of the various experiences that we have as trans people. And also just community spaces where we can just be, listing out spaces, a lot of people say, oh, there's like this gay space or this lesbian space. But when you talk about trans spaces, the conversation kind of just halts. I think that Atlanta is in a very unique opportunity right now, considering it's a pandemic. But I feel like with all of the kind of the things that have been happening this year, conversations around, finding like housing security and also like community spaces is really important right now. And I feel like it's on everybody's conversations. So I think that it's something that we as a community can realistically, firmly establish in the near future.
Justine or Jesse?
I totally agree with Taylor. But I know that we do need more spaces for trans folks that are actually ran by us. So there are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of places here in Atlanta that will house trans people, but it's a limited amount. And then there's a lot of stipulations. So I do know that if there are places that are ran by trans people for trans people, we can actually connect more with our community and provide those with the other services that they may need.
Okay, I agree with everything that was said. There's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to spaces within the LGBT community even. So that's why it's so important what Justine just said, that there are spaces ran by trans people. Like, people don't understand how affirming it is to walk into a space and see people that look like you or that are from your community. So like having spaces that are ran and owned by trans people are so important for the community. And when it comes to housing, trans people face so much discrimination from multiple levels, from the government, from organizations. So again, like having these trans owned and led initiatives are so important right now in this current climate, because we've been discriminated against within the community and outside of the community. So yeah.
Okay. Well, and Jesse, so in December, you launched the Homeless Black Trans Women Fund, and you initially raised $10,000, but by April, I think it had run out of funds. And then something amazing happened. As the protests for racial justice ignited across the country, support started pouring in for the fund. And as of this morning, when I checked, it's raised more than $2.7 million, which just floors me. Has the success of the campaign surprised you?
Yes and no. It surprised me because, it really just started as just another crowd fund, within the queer and trans community, especially in recent years. We've kind of taken things into our own hands when it comes to housing each other, feeding each other, taking care of each other. I mean, the trans community has always done that. But now with the advent of social media, suddenly anyone has this access to create a platform for themselves and for the community. So I took it upon myself with my platform, to use that to advocate for the community, and just for my girls that I knew, because I live near them, and we became close, and I started this small campaign for them, and it really revealed all of the underlying issues that have existed for decades that, people have been trying to alleviate, but the rest of the world wasn't listening. And now with the movement for Black Lives, it seems like suddenly people are caring, but people have been, fighting this fight for a long time. And I'm very, very pleased that people from around the world are suddenly paying attention for the need, specifically for Black trans lives in a city like Atlanta, because, Atlanta is a very Black city, a very queer city. And in general, within the community, people need to understand that until Black trans people are free and have the same protections and rights as everyone else, no one else will be. This campaign started for a group of friends and family, but it turned into something much bigger and a unique opportunity to help alleviate homelessness within the trans and gender nonconforming community. Just like I said, folks like Justine and other folks have been doing the work for so long, but it wasn't all this coalescence of this pandemic, the movement for Black Lives, and all of the movements coalescing together has really formed this like perfect storm of. So I really think it's a unique opportunity.
And so what's the plan for how you're going to use the funds?
That's a golden question. So with this much money, it takes a lot of managing. I have consulted with folks all across the city, that organizers that have been doing the work, from different organizations, including Trans Housing Atlanta program, other people reaching out. I'm reaching out to folks, seeing what their needs are, so we can form a coalition to work together to fulfill the needs of trans folks throughout the city. There's no partnerships finalized yet, so I can't announce anything specifically. But first and foremost, I'm taking care of the girls that were originally part of the project, which began actually as a photo project. It was something very personal, something that it was just for me and them, and I realized that I had the opportunity to possibly help them with my platform on Instagram and with my connections to community. So my plan is to get them into permanent housing. The barriers still exist of getting trans people into permanent housing, the barriers of not having identification, facing discrimination when getting identification and all that stuff. So the money will go towards investing in spaces for trans people, and paying for trans folks to get into permanent housing that according to what they want, not because what trans people, it's centered around what each specific person needs and wants. So
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does very much. Thank you. And I can imagine there's a lot of work just to manage that amount of money. So Justine, I wanted to ask you about the Trans Housing Atlanta program. You're the program manager for there. And there's an ongoing capital campaign with a goal of $150,000. So can you talk a little bit about where that fundraising stands and what the program will do?
So Trans Housing Atlanta program, we are our organization located in the metro Atlanta area that houses transgender and gender nonconforming folks. So we've been doing that since 2014. So since the beginning of it, we have been raising money for a capital campaign to just purchase our own housing for trans folks. So some type of communal living where people are free, they can rent our rooms, they can stay there for free, whatever they may need. But in the meantime, we do have just a regular case management campaign, because what we've noticed is that people are already still needing services. So they can't necessarily wait for us to raise $150,000. The need is now. So we do a little bit of both. We're very strategic in how we apply for funding. Most of the organization and most of the funding and donations we get are from actually community, from themselves, who are just wanting to support us. So that's how we're raising money through the capital campaign. We're about halfway there. So we need as many donations as possible to get to that space. This also, what I will say, it kind of coincides with things that Jesse is doing. So yes, we do have a lot of money and a lot of resources pouring into Atlanta within the last couple of months, but we still have no structures that are able to house transgender and gender nonconforming people. So we want everybody just to kind of build upon that and kind of invest into these own spaces. And then also what we're doing at TAP, in addition to raising money for our capital campaign to purchase our own housing, we're starting to do a lot of collaborative effort. So just last week, we opened a house out in College Park in collaboration with the organization A Vision for Hope to house 7 trans women for up to 1 year for free. So they can stay there, they can get connected to wraparound services, get IDs. Some of them are starting jobs on Monday, and then they're able to stay into that house, and hopefully that can start a process of where we are acquiring more spaces through collaboration, and we can get multiple houses. So I know that our vision at THAP, particularly my vision, is to work with numerous organizations and acquire numerous spaces throughout the city. So like Jesse said, trans and gender nonconforming people who need some type of housing, they have choices of where they want to go to. So whether they want to go to somewhere where it's more independent living, they just pay for a room, or whether they want to go into a program where they can get more help, more mental health, more substance abuse, whatever services that they may need.
Is the goal of it to provide emergency housing and services so people can get their feet under them and then be able to move into something else? Or
so all of the above.
Okay.
So the issue is that within the trans community and within the current resources, we can't afford to just say, hey, we're just going to do emergency housing or transitional housing or permanent housing. At this point, we have to do everything. As of right now, within our capacity within the city, a lot of it is just doing emergency housing until we can kind of really, in essence, just make up things to put people so they can have somewhere to sleep at night. But our goal is to be an organization that does emergency housing, transitional, and can provide some type of permanent housing to our clients and individuals that we're serving.
Okay. And Taylor, so in early June, you launched a fundraising campaign called Help Fund a Black Queer-Owned Community Space. And you reached your initial goal of $50,000. And then when I checked this morning, the total was nearing $73,000. And you have a new goal of raising $100,000. What spurred you to launch the fundraiser, and what will the money do?
So we have been, SFQP, Southern Fried Queer Pride, we've always had it within our vision to have a community space. For as long as I've been in Atlanta, just community spaces, especially those ran by Black and Brown folks, have been minimal. The only kind of community center spaces that have kind of popped up have been, the Rush Center, and that's kind of been it. We don't really have a lot of bookstores besides Karis for people to congregate at. And a lot of the spaces that we use for our events as a DIY organization are not owned by queer people. They're not owned by Black and Brown people. And they tend to disappear within 2 to 3 years because a lot of those organizations don't own those properties. They're renting, they're leasing. A developer comes along and wants to turn it into a Starbucks. And so they do that. And so we've always had it in our vision to have a community space where we're able to put on our programming and events, but it's also open to the community to, grow through the arts, grow through workshops, through, organizing, but also be a space for just communing. Would also be a space for thrift shop where clothes are, either cheap or free for people. because that's still something that people need, or resource that people need. And so we've tried fundraising in the past, and we've done it twice, and it never went over $800. I don't know what happened this year, but something changed.
Jesse. So now everybody gets donations. Thank you, Jesse.
But yeah, this year it just we had a lot of people asking, because I feel like a lot of the issues that we've had as a community just became even more under the microscope and even more glaring because of the pandemic, because of our government failing us, and people getting kind of like, questioning, well, what's going to happen in 2021 if we're even able to meet in person? Like, will there be spaces for us to even congregate? So we decided to launch the campaign in June. And so we launched it June 8th. And so as of right now, we just hit over $100,000 total in all donations so far. And we're still fundraising. We're going to keep fundraising. And it's just been really beautiful to see people show up and help out and make this dream a reality.
Have you gotten to the point where you've been scouting locations and where to, now that the funding it's starting to come in, have you looked at places where you might go?
Yes, I've been scouting locations for the past like 6 or 7 years. Just like looking like that would be a great community center. That's right next to MARTA. That's a perfect place. But not having the money, so it was just a dream back then. But we have been looking at locations. We've been doing some tours of possible places. So now it's just a matter of securing the funding needing to officially buy the place. And then also continue fundraising for renovations, making it completely ADA accessible, things like that, and getting it up to code. So that's where we are kind of like right now, is looking at all of the options and seeing which makes the most sense for our community.
Right. Okay. Well, and so in my experience covering the LGBTQ community over the years, raising funds for transgender causes has been a really heavy lift. What do you think's changed? What has fed this amazing level of support that all the campaigns have seen in the last few months? That's any of y'all who would like to tackle that?
I think the increased presence of actually what's going on within the trans media on social media, within the trans community on social media. So I know with the rioting and the Black Lives Matter movement, there was a young lady who was attacked in Minnesota, I believe. And she was brutally attacked in her line, and the way social media is working, like everybody saw it and everybody was outraged. And I think that kind of like shined a light on support of like supporting Black trans folks, Black and brown trans and queer people within their own spaces. We have been here. We've always been trying to raise money and get support for our organizations, but we've always kind of been ignored, or organizations or allies have made promises that they have not always kept. But with this increased presence of social media, the accountability culture that we're moving into, so if you say you're going to do something, do it, or we'll find you on social media, that has like sparked people to support Black and trans and queer causes. And then also I know that with Jesse, what she did was phenomenal and amazing, because she brought more attention to other smaller grassroots organizations here within Atlanta. So I know specifically for THAB, I know the last time we checked, we raised like $4,000, and that was just from her mentioning us in her GoFundMe and people going to our site and donating. So like, it was kind of weird, because it was like, where's all these PayPals coming? What's going on? But then I was like, oh, okay, so JC started that, and so now it's coming back to us. And then also around the country, I've been noticing a lot of GoFundMes in regards to housing popping up. So Kayla Gore out of Memphis, Tennessee, who does phenomenal work, and then Milan Sherry in New Orleans with the House of Tulip. They have also always done work for providing spaces, safe spaces for trans, especially trans women. We've been seeing that pop up, and they've been getting a lot of support as well. So I want to say like Jesse probably like started the movement and then
I did not start the movement.
she didn't actually start the movement, but I think she brought a lot of attention to those smaller cities or those smaller places that oftentimes are ignored. Atlanta. So
Okay. Jesse, Taylor, any thoughts on that?
Well, like I said, I think it's the coalescence of everything and the increasing. I think visibility is obviously very important, as we've seen, but it's also a double-edged sword, as we've seen, because the violence has continued. Like Justine mentioned, there's at least 20 Black trans women that have been killed this year. So the visibility is increasing, but the violence continues. So we really need to hold the culture and everyone accountable for that, and that contributing to these campaigns is the first step. It's the bare minimum, but actually, stepping outside yourself to do, contribute to the movement in other ways. Mutual aid isn't just about giving money. It's about giving resources, giving time, food, whatever you can give. But being part of a community requires investing in community. So I think it's a lot of things, everything that Justine mentioned. Using whatever platform you have, even if it's not social media. If you have family members who have privileges, who have money, who have resources, just using whatever platform or privileges you have to uplift the movements that have been ignored and the folks that have been marginalized. So yeah, it's impressive. It's an exciting time to be in right now.
right.
Yeah, I just want to echo what everyone has said so far. I think it's really beautiful because, just especially looking at it from like a Southern lens, the South usually is not included in a lot of conversations around, queer rights, trans housing, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes we're forgotten, even though we've always been here doing the work. And so it's beautiful to see so many organizations that I've known for years, like who've just been like doing the work and doing it with, a very small budget, getting, all this attention on social media, all these donations. And I think that, we're in a time where like a lot of things, like Jesse said, a lot of things are coalescing. So we had, the pandemic, and then we have the uprising for Black lives. And it's kind of like, social disgust with the way that our society is working. So a lot of people, not even working, how our society is failing. So a lot of people are wondering, how do I get involved? And so for a lot of people, who have more resources, first they do donations, and that's wonderful. Keep on donating. And then I think a lot of people are now questioning their politics and how they move as people in this world. And they're wondering, okay, well, I've donated, I'm starting to question my politics. Now we're redistributing our resources. Now people are, getting into the mindset, the rhetoric that, okay, if I'm donating to these people, but I'm also operating in spaces where there are no Black trans people, where there are no undocumented people, where there are no, people of XYZ experience, I feel like that's the next step where we're going, because, equity is the next step. Full on justice is the next step. Equality is a very, fickle word in movement. So I think we're entering this age where a lot of people who have had privileges, who have had resources, are sitting back and being like, I need to do more, because donating can only sustain for so long. Donations might run dry, but if there's people who experience life in certain ways, like Black trans people, Black non-binary people, if they're, getting these jobs and getting these resources and getting in positions of power, that's something that can change situations for years to come, and I think we're also thinking about sustainability in this movement. What happens, in 2021 when hopefully we're able to meet in person again? Will people keep on donating? Will people keep on questioning how they can support the movement? So I think that's the next step in all of this.
Okay. Well, and I wanted to turn a little bit to the ongoing protests in Atlanta. They've included transgender people to some varying degrees. There were 2 marches in June that were specifically focused on supporting Black trans people. But I wanted to ask all of you if you feel like the Atlanta protests are including trans people, and talk a little bit about why it's important for these protests and this movement to have trans visibility. Who would like to jump in there first?
So no, I think to be clear, the 2 protests that was in Atlanta that was targeted towards trans people, Black trans people, was actually started by Black trans people. I don't think that the general protest included us. So they say Black Lives Matter. They're not talking about Black trans lives. They don't necessarily matter. And I think just for a lot, especially for my trans sisters, we didn't really feel safe going out into those spaces and marching with those people, because to us, for many of us, those are the people that are our aggressors, or those are the folks who attack us. So no, it didn't quite include us. But in my view, and my perception was, okay, this is needed. So never to like diminish anything that's going on, the protest, because that was needed. But I'm like, okay, I'm sitting at home, and then when the rest of the community is ready to strategize and come up with some solutions and do some hardcore strategic planning and programming, then that's when I know that I can go and support. But for me and many of my sisters, that just wasn't a safe place for us to go to and to partake in.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't involved in the protest either, because I've been having to quarantine with family. But that's, yeah, as trans people, that's something, you know, especially with protesting, you know, it's a lot more complicated when it comes to, for us, you know, like I want to be out there as much as anyone, but, you know, it's a lot more unsafe. You know, going to a men's prison is not an option. It's not what I'm trying to do. So, but aside from that, what Justine said, I think that a lot of folks have been pointing that out within the movement about folks leaving out trans folks from the larger movement for Black lives. So everything what Justine said in regards to that, but yeah.
Okay. Taylor, any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I'm just echoing everything that Justine said. I think it's how do I say this? When Black trans people see a whole bunch of people, let's take like downtown Centennial Olympic Park, for example. When a whole bunch of Black trans people see protests that aren't exactly uplifting the names of people like us who have been killed, especially, you know, at the hands of police, at a place that is fenced in, Centennial Olympic Park, which is right across the street from the Atlanta police precinct, it's a trap. It doesn't, I don't know any people, especially Black trans people, who are like, I want to go and put myself on the line to potentially be subjected to more violence. And we all know what happens when Black trans people are sent to jail. It's not a good thing, period. I will say that a lot of the marches or protests that I've been to that have been kind of centered around Black trans lives have been started by Black trans people. I went to 2 marches in Midtown, and then I went to 2 vigils and kind of more like just community gatherings that were organized by Black trans people. And I think that Black trans folks, we are organizing in a way that's not putting ourselves, you know, directly in the crossfires of, you know, police. You know, I think that we're organizing more so like, all right, times are hard. How can we like come together as a community? How can we get these resources? A lot of the organizing or activism has been online, you know, checking in with people to make sure that they have like a roof over their head, that they're getting food, that they're getting resources, that they're, you know, able to access their hormones, that they're, you know, all these things. I think there are different ways to engage in the movement without showing up to a protest every day. And to those people who are showing up to the protest, more power to you. I wish I could do that. But as somebody who is Black, trans, immunocompromised, especially during a pandemic, sometimes that's not where I'm best needed. I think that, yeah, sometimes it's hard to, sometimes when I hear about these protests and I know that they're automatically centering cis, heterosexual, Black men, I think if, you know, the people who are showing up are there for Black trans people, are there for Black trans lives. You know, we did a mural in downtown near Krog Street that said, you know, it's just simply Black trans lives matter. And we also did one that said abolish the police. But, you know, in a matter of days, we go back and trans is scratched out. And then I see on Instagram who is scratching out the trans. And it's a Black person. And that's kind of where we're at, where, you know, we want to be there for everybody's liberation, because we all can't get free until everybody is free. But at the same time, I don't feel safe marching next to somebody who probably thinks that my existence equals like the need for violence against me. So that's kind of where a lot of people are at.
Right. Well, and I think all of you touched on this a little bit, but what can LG and B people do, and people and allies do to help trans folks?
You got time? Okay. First and foremost, be very intentional about partnering and collaborating with organizations. So again, I just partnered with A Vision for Hope to open a house. And A Vision for Hope had more resources and they had more capacity to do that, which in such a short amount of time than that had in 6 years. So just partnering and collaborating, and their ED Dwayne Crowder over there just being very intentional and keeping me up on that process, we were able to do so much in a month. So I think that's the first step, just making sure that these LGBT people and organizations and allies are specifically partnering with trans folks. Also, hiring, so hire people, bring them to the organization, do a lot of professional development with them, because unfortunately, and I know even for me, as a Black trans woman, I didn't get a lot of those skills that were needed, professional skills. I think when I transitioned, it was stay alive, do whatever you need to do to get to the next phase. So if someone would have took the time with me at the beginning, just an ally, to just do more professional development or bring me into an organization and show me things, and I think that me as a professional or me as an individual would got a lot further. Yes, people hire us, but we also know that a lot of organizations and a lot of people are hiring us or bringing us into their clubs and their events just for their own gain and not necessarily for us. So just know that we realize and we know that what's going on, but be more intentional moving forward about how you're assisting us, how you're using us. There's a saying that always people say free work is deadly, and especially for trans folks, free work is violent and it's deadly. Compensate us for our experiences, and then also go a step further to develop us.
Okay. Taylor or Jesse?
All I would say is just listen and follow Black trans leadership. I've seen a lot of people speaking over Black trans people when even we're talking about Black trans lives. So just like listen to Black trans folks, follow their leadership, get engaged. If you're trying to get more involved in trans rights and whatnot, find a political home. I can't preach that more. There's so many different organizations and groups who have been on the ground doing work in Atlanta for years who are just now getting the proper flowers that they deserve. So link up with them and find out how you can, you know, support the movement through supporting them, because we don't need a lot of people speaking over the folks who are actually living the life and doing the work. So that's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have nothing to add except for non-trans people, decentering yourself from the movement, like Justine said, tokenizing has been something that has become a problem because, with trans visibility comes, the tokenization of trans folks, oh, we're visible, so that's enough, but it's, as I said, visibility has not been enough, until the redistribution of resources, which includes hiring, which includes, education, which includes, centering within every aspect of your life and a movement and the places that you inhabit, that, it's not going to be enough. So yeah, reaching out to these, organizations, seeing how you can volunteer. There's so many folks in Atlanta that are doing the work, Southern Pride, Queer Pride, FAP, transcending barriers. So yeah, there's so much you could be doing within every movement, centering trans folks.
Okay, great. And we have several questions from folks that attended, so I wanted to get to some of those. One from Ralph Beckworth is, can each of you give a couple? He asked for three, but they asked for three. Can you give 3 takeaway points in terms of important things to teach others, especially those who might not be so open to trans issues? Who wants to give some takeaways?
I think that the first thing that people who are not particularly familiar with trans issues know the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. So I think a lot of the roots of our problems are within the trans community is that people always associate us with sex or how we have sex. And so get out of that and just look at us as individual people with our own choices. This is not something that people choose. I don't think anybody wants to wake up in fear of their life or being ridiculed or all of the things that come with just being your authentic self. So I think that a lot of people just need to realize that gender identity and sexual orientation is not the same, and just stop thinking of everything as sex, which is hard. Working like public health in the sex industry, but yeah, it's hard, but just get that out of your mind frame.
Okay. And let's see. Is there a fundraiser for legal funds to combat housing discrimination? Any of you all aware of anything like that?
What I will say is there are legal organizations around. I know that within the city, there is city of Atlanta, there is an anti-discrimination ordinance. So what that has done on a few occasions, specifically with the Salvation Army, I'm sorry if y'all are on here because y'all been doing better, but with the Salvation Army, there was a policy in place that they would not let trans women sleep on the side with other cisgender women, and they would discriminate against them. And then they also they designed a place for 4 trans women to sleep in, but then if other homeless trans women were there, they either had to sleep on the men's side, and if there was no room in there, it was just a whole mess, whole discrimination mess. So what we did was, because of that ordinance, we would file grievances with the Human Relations Committee, and we would take that up to City Hall and file grievances with the mayor, and that it only goes so far because this discrimination and all of that it's just so deep embedded. But it did set the precedent that there's organizations and organizers here that don't care. We will call you out at every standpoint. So I know we'll go and we'll stand out in front of your sign with in your organization with signs saying, trans lives matter. But that's that. But there are, I think, ACLU, there are legal places here in Atlanta that you can donate to, or you can get more information about how you can support in that.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, I'm a trans man who doesn't currently have a job, but when I do get a job, I would need a list of housing areas or places that are trans friendly. Are there trans housing? Is there trans housing help for someone who is not a teen? Because this person says they're almost 30.
So yeah, that. But this is the issue. So so youth here in Atlanta, LGBT youth, like there's a lot more youth resources for those who are under 23. When you get over 23 and you age out of those systems, that there's not a lot of resources. We're able to help you. I can't say that there's some place in Atlanta that's just trans friendly and there's like a big community. That's what we're working on right now. But just contact us, Trans Housing Atlanta program, or really you can type in transgender housing in Atlanta and we'll be like the first person to pop up and contact us, send an email and we can talk to you about it. What I realize and what I do tell people, I don't know if everybody's here is watching from Atlanta, be very mindful. I don't never want to discourage people to move to Atlanta, but we know Atlanta is like a Black gay mecca. But be very mindful when you move here that there are absolutely no resources and no protections that are in other cities like New York or LA. This is not that. This is still very, very much the deep South. So unfortunately, when you get here, there are organizations and organizers here to help, but it'll be a very, very hard process to get you to that point. So that's when people are saying, what can they do to help, to volunteer? Lend a sofa, lend a spare bedroom, donate to organizations, get a hotel room for somebody, provide food cards. Those are little things that you can do to help someone who's in transition to the next phase. Because just this year alone, that has helped 77 people. We've helped 77 people on a budget of like $30,000. So we're just like trying to grab from everywhere and coming out of our own individual pockets to help people kind of sustain and get to the next place.
Yeah. I would say depending on what that person needs, the way that I've been able to find trans affirming houses is within, online, within community, like I said, our community looks out for each other, and I don't want to live with, a cisgender person who may not be used to being around trans people or, so, there's a lot of Facebook groups. There's Atlanta Queer and Trans People of Color on Facebook, but, they can reach out to me, or, I could connect them with the Facebook groups or depending on what they want. But there are always people looking for housing, so there are folks that may have a room open, but like Justine said, there's no like one place to go to, for trans folks to find affirming or safe spaces, because the sad reality of it is there is no such thing as a safe space for trans folks in a society and culture that is constantly dehumanizing and committing violence against us. So we have to, we can take what we can get right now and hope to create safer spaces for us. But yeah, reaching out to community folks, hopefully we can connect them to an affirming place for them to live.
Right, and we also, THAP has a Facebook group. I forgot to mention it. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah. You can go on Facebook and type in Trans Housing Atlanta programs. People post all day with rooms opening up or looking for roommates. And so I send people who are looking to connect with folks to be roommates and open houses and open bedrooms. They kind of post on that all day and people can connect that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then one last question from one of our attendees. It says, panelists look notably young to him. Do you all think that your youth makes differences in your approach? And what can older folks in power and privilege learn from y'all?
Ooh. I'm not young, it's just estrogen and water.
That is a good question.
It's a spicy question.
I feel like there are a lot of, I feel like folks in general are resistant to change and the way things are changing. And I feel like younger folks have, taken a hold of course, social media, because it became an advent in our generation, and using that as a new way to connect with folks and to fuel this movement. And I feel like some folks have been, resistant towards the use of social media in certain ways, or and the way that people use it in order for this movement. So I feel like older elders can learn from that, using I think helping folks, connect to their own platforms is a way to do that.
Okay. Taylor, anything on that?
Yeah, I would say that I agree. Social media has completely changed the game, and there are always going to be generational differences. When I came to Atlanta, I got linked up with a whole bunch of, I guess we would call them elders in the community who just like completely swore off the internet. They're still doing phone calls. They're still writing letters, and that's how their part of the community communicates, and that's real, and that's valid, and that's still needed. Then there's this younger generation who, most of our activism is done through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, links and websites and whatnot, and that's completely valid. I think that there are, what's the word I'm looking for? There are pluses and minuses to every kind of way that we kind of organize and build community. There's also, generational differences in how we identify. I know a lot of older trans folks who do not believe that, non-binary people are a thing. They don't understand the they, thems, the others. And that's something that we're dealing with within the community. We still have love for each other, but we're still trying to understand each other. And so there's a whole bunch of generational divides, but I think over time we're slowly but surely breaking those walls down and finding where we align. So, yeah.
Okay. Justine, anything you want to add to that?
I just agree with them. What I would say is just, again, like partner. I feel like we all have our own strengths, and I think that older generations have a lot of wisdom, and they can advise us on a lot of things. So I know for me, just listening to those who have been doing the work for 20 and 30 years, they were able to help me and network because they can call, with the whole phone calls and writing, they can call somebody and get something done quickly versus me wanting to tweet it out. But, I think it's different impacts. So I think if we kind of work together and everybody plays off their own strengths, that's what we can do. We don't want to change anybody's form of advocacy, but just kind of bring it all together to make a bigger impact.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. So as we look to wrap up, I wanted to give a big thank you to Taylor, Justine, and Jesse for their time today. And I have one last question for each of you. Where can people follow you or find out more information about your campaigns or organizations?
I'll start. So if people want to follow Southern Fried Queer Pride, you can go to our website, which is southernfriedqueerpride.com. If you are on Instagram, and that's your Zhuj, you can follow us at SFQP. On Twitter, we are at SFQPATL. On Facebook, we are Southern Fried Queer Pride. And if you want to learn more about the campaign that we have right now, you can find that on all of our social media. And if you want to follow me anywhere, my name is Taylor Alxndr. So that's at TAYLORALXNDR. And that's on all formats, including Cash App. So yeah.
You can follow Trans Housing Atlanta program. So transhousingatlanta.org is our website. You can go there and donate directly, or you can go there if you need services. There's a little form you can fill out, and it'll come directly to our email address. We are on Facebook at Trans Housing Atlanta Program. So just type it in. And also you can find me on Facebook, Justine Ingram, just first name Justine, last name Ingram, and inbox me and I can get you connected to where you need to go to.
And all my information is at J Pratt López, either .photos is my Instagram, my website is the same, my email is jpratlopez@gmail.com. On my Instagram is where you can find the bulk of my photography work and my activism. You can connect to the stuff that I've done, and in the link in my bio you can find the GoFundMe campaign that really details everything that the campaign has done so far, what we plan to do. We provide updates pretty much weekly. about what we've been doing, who we've been helping. We've actually been able to help 25 girls so far, but you know, we don't have the infrastructure yet to continue necessarily until we formalize what we're doing. So if you follow me, you can. We'll be announcing a website soon and all that good stuff. So thank y'all for having me.
Great. Well, thank you to the three of you and to everyone who attended. It's a great discussion, and I appreciate all of your questions and the time for everybody. So that's it. So have a good weekend. Stay safe. Wear your mask, and
Yes.
have a good weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Thank you so much. Bye.